Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a safe place for leading with your heart. Hey, thanks for being here. You, Me, Empathy is the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective, a collaborative mental health community designed to empower each of us to grow our capacity for empathy, vulnerability, and emotional wayfinding. Just a friendly reminder that this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. No one is just a silly boy with a feely heart. You can support the show by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts, following us on social media at Yumi Empathy and Feely Human, and joining the Feely Human Collective community at feelyhuman.co. And now your host, Known Wells.
Hello, Feely Humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells. I am your host, creator, founder of the Feely Human Collective, and this is episode 194 on money anxiety with financial educator Allison Baggerly. Allison is someone who teaches folks like you things like budgeting, how to pay off debt, how to save money, how to ultimately stop living paycheck to paycheck. Money is a topic that we really haven't explored on this show. I'm really excited that we did get to talk about this because money is a thing. As you probably know, Feely Humans, it is a thing for me. It's a thing that brings up anxiety. It can bring up fear and shame and guilt and all sorts of feelings. And we talk about that in this episode. We also talk about the high expectations we put on ourselves, talking to your parents about mental health, teenager depression, of which I had and my guest Allison had. And like I said, navigating the feelings of shame, fear, and anxiety around money. Money. Yeah, money. That thing. Money. Isn't that a song? Money? Pink Floyd, maybe? Money? No, something else. I don't know. Anyways, I loved this chat. Allison is wonderful. She's a feely human like you and me. Before we get to the episode, though, I wanted to remind you that this very Tuesday, tomorrow, in fact, September 28th at 4 p.m. Pacific time, I'm hosting the next Illustrating Empathy workshop. It's a deep dive into empathy for self, empathy for others, even empathy for the people who bug us in our life. So if you're free, I would so love to see you there. There are plenty of more spots available. Again, it's Tuesday, tomorrow, September 28th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. You can learn more at feelyhuman.co. Click on the banner there or go to illustratingempathy.com. Would love to see you there. It's a 90-minute workshop. I lead it. You get to see my face, my silly, silly face, and I get to see your beautiful face, and it will be great. And I hope to see you. Okay, that's that. And then the other thing is make sure to follow the show on Instagram. That's the only social media we have. It's at YouMeEmpathy on Instagram. And the Feely Human Collective is at Feely Human. And if you'd like to, do things like write for the Feely Human Collective, which you can do, my dear pal Katya Lidsky recently wrote a beautiful love letter to her sweet Ophelia called Ophelia's Tangerines. It's available right now in the Feely Human Collective Journal at feelyhuman.co/stories. Check that out. Read it. Let me know how much it makes you cry because it made me cry and it's beautiful. So check that out. If you want to write for the Feely Human Collective, check that out. Go to feelyhuman.co, click on the journal, writing guidelines. Even if you want to lead a workshop, I'm open to that. Hit me up. DM me on Instagram at feelyhuman or reach out at hello@feelyhuman.co. And the last thing I'll say is please leave a rating and review for this podcast in Apple Podcasts. The more ratings and reviews that happen, the more that people see the show and listen to it, and the more mental health and feelings and empathy is in the world. And you, like me, I know you want to make the world more feely, and it's hard, and it takes time. It takes one heart at a time, is what I say. So tell your friends about You, Me, Empathy. Tell your friends about the Feely Human Collective. The last thing is that in the shop right now at feelyhuman.co/shop, the pins are enamel pins. We have 3 different versions, are 25% off if you use the code PINS25. Again, the code is PINS25 at feelyhuman.co/shop. I can't say slash today. I'm tired. I think I'm tired. I'm doing this on Sunday, late afternoon. And a late afternoon for me, people, is just drooling and slurring time. That's just the time that I do that, and that's what's happening right now. So let's get to the episode because it's wonderful. It's with my new pal, Allison Baggerly, on money anxiety. Enjoy. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, the official podcast of the Feely Human Collective. On this show, we explore the struggles, the triumphs, the brights and the darks we face as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of You, Me, Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. You, Me, Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, I've come prepared to learn a whole lot because I'm here with budget expert, financial anxiety soother, and debt stigma destroyer, Allison Baggerly. Hello, Allison.
Hi, Known. How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm a little nervous. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of the podcasts I do are, just talking more about motivating others and, just about our story. So this is exciting because we get to kind of dive into it a little bit deeper.
Yes, I'm excited. I'm here for that. I also empathize. I'm someone who's been doing this show for over 3.5 years, and I still get a little anxious before every recording. So I'm with you on that, friend.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it's understandable, right? Like this space, this mental health space, this feely space, this vulnerable space. It takes practice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I agree with that.
Like practice, like getting used to the language of finances, or getting used to budgeting, or anything like that. Anything I think worth doing is it takes work and discomfort.
Oh, yes. And, I think a lot of people find themselves in a position as adults and feeling overwhelmed and scared and unaware, and like they're almost like they're dumb because maybe they don't know much about finances, or they don't know how to manage their money, or maybe they've landed themselves into a position that they're honestly just not proud of. And I know that's exactly where I found myself whenever I was in my 20s.
Yeah, so I do want to unpack that, but before we get to that, we do always kick off the show with just an emotional check-in. I know you mentioned you're nervous, but how else are you feeling? How's your week been?
Oh gosh, my week has been good. I'm a little overwhelmed just based off of things that I have put on my own plate. Just as a small business owner, I've realized that people don't tell me what to do. I add things to my own list. And my kids are home from school still. They're not back in school yet. And so I'm having trouble. It's not really balance isn't the word, because I think that it can be very hard to find balance in life. But I think just meeting my own probably too high expectations. So I am feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but also just it's empowering that I'm able to create my own schedule and be flexible. And I remind myself that even though I'm adding all these things to my plate, I also am the one that can take them off my plate.
What an insight that is. That's such an important insight, especially for people who, run their own show, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it's I was going to say, it's such a wonderful and important insight around this idea that, hey, Allison, you have your own business, you create your own schedule. What an amazing achievement that is. And also, hey, there's struggle in that too, right? Like, I think we can hold all of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about how you were raised, your childhood. What was that like?
I mean, I would say, oh gosh, I say average. I guess I don't have much to compare it to in terms of other people's childhoods, but my parents are married. They're still married to this day. And I had an older brother who was just a year older in school. So we were very close in terms of sharing a lot of the same friends and just kind of going through life together. I think that my husband, he has a younger brother who's 4 years younger. So it seems like they weren't at the same stages of life at the same time, like my brother and I were. And graduated, went off to college, and started really just learning about being an adult and how sometimes I wish I could just go back to childhood.
Yeah, how do you mean?
Where there wasn't as many things on your plate. And really, I mean, I think I got pregnant young. Young is, I guess, relative, but I got pregnant on my honeymoon when I was 24. And so I felt like, compared to the people I was surrounding myself with, I felt like I was having to make adult decisions before I was ready to have to make adult decisions. And so there were times I would find myself thinking, gosh, I had it made, or it was so much easier 10 years ago.
Yeah. How did that, I get that. How did that maybe anxiety or pressure surface as a sort of 24-year-old mom?
Gosh, I mean, I guess one thing I also didn't share is that I struggled with depression when I was, I think it started about 13 or 14, struggled with depression, went through therapy. Therapy saved me at an age when therapy honestly was not, proclaimed as this wonderful option for helping you work through issues. And so, my parents, my mom took me to therapy weekly for a period of time. And I went through therapy through part of college, and I was on antidepressants, and later on, getting pregnant, having that anxiety really weighed on me, just because now I had all this anxiety about, am I ready to be a mom? Number one, just emotionally, mentally, and financially, I very much did not feel ready to be a mom. I felt like I was just barely scraping by. I was just barely scraping by. My husband and I were. And so that was really hard. That was really hard to deal with.
I do want to unpack that, but you mentioned the depression. Do you look back on that time and reflect on where that came from? What was going on in your 13-year-old little noggin?
No, I usually don't look back on it. I just look back and I remember how I felt. And there are what I like to do is I like to talk about it with my friends, so that way they can maybe identify it in their own children if they're going through it.
Sure.
Because having two parents that didn't struggle with that, you don't see the warning signs. You don't see the red flags. And I didn't know how to identify it in myself. I didn't know any of that. And I think, I don't have a lot of memories. I think maybe I blacked out a lot of those memories because it was a hard time in my life. And so, that's my brain's way of naturally trying to protect me is by not remembering some of those things. And my mom will remind me of them. And, gosh, I don't remember where I was going with this.
Well, I'm curious, like, I get that. Like, I think there's a lot of protecting and armoring we do to forget some things. And I think for me, and it doesn't need to be for everyone, for me, I've had to do a lot of sort of like reflecting back just to like come to a point of like, who the heck am I now as an adult, right? Do you think there was anything, if you're thinking about it, if there's anything that your mother saw in you or your parents saw in you that sort of like got them to the point of like, oh, maybe she needs to go see a therapist?
No, I went to them. I went to my mom. Yes. Cause I remember just feeling like literal weight on my shoulders. I will never forget it. Just feeling this literal weight. And apparently I don't even remember going to her, but she says, I went to her and I said, I think I'm depressed.
Wow.
And, which takes courage.
Oh,
right?
Huge courage.
Like, so much courage to have to go to someone and say, something's not quite right.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of courage. And so I'm proud of past Allison for being willing to do that and take that step and realize that something's not quite right. And I want something to be different. And I didn't feel like myself.
Yes.
And so, immediately my mom was like, okay, let's take you, like, let's book a psychiatrist appointment. Let's book a therapist appointment. Let's figure out what we need to do. So I am so thankful that, I know a lot of parents might just say like, oh, no, you're fine. Or, oh, that's just hormones. That could have been, an easy response to me. But instead, I had parents that said, okay, let's go the next step, even if it's messy, even if it costs more money, even if we're not really sure what we're doing next, let's do it.
They listened.
Yes, they did.
It's such a crucial moment because I know for many, look, I'm not a parent, but parenting's got to be so very hard, very hard. And 13-year-olds are just, little shits, right? Like I know I was a little shit and I was depressed.
Yeah.
But I also, and I think another part of this is like you felt, first of all, so brave to bring it up. And secondly, you felt safe enough to bring it up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when I think about it, I think I want my kids, I have 2 boys. One of them is 9. So we're getting to that age where things just become a little bit more complicated in terms of learning about life and just feeling our feelings. And I think, how do I foster an environment where my kids can come to me and not be scared that I'm just going to say, oh, no, don't worry about that. Or, oh, that's not a problem. Because I'm sure that is what people face.
Yeah. Have you had moments with your kids, not necessarily your kids talking about depression or anything like that, but just moments where you had to sort of just listen and reflect and sort of meet them where they're at?
Yeah. My oldest son, just as they get older, usually it's about friends. And that I feel like that's like the beginning of it is friends aren't getting along or feeling sad about this one thing. And so we have listened, my husband and I both, and we try to advise him to stand up for himself. And, and he has. I'm really, really proud of him because he has stood up for himself in certain situations. And we don't want him to, and we tell him, look, you're going through this. Part of the reason why you might be going through this is because now you know how it feels. So you won't treat now you know what this feels like. And now you can make sure that you don't ever make anyone feel this way. And that's the way I think of it. Is I used to think once my depression was under control, I used to think, oh my gosh, like maybe I had to endure this so that I can speak to other people. I used to think like, well, maybe I'll work for, some sort of group that goes around to countries and talks to goes around the country and talks to high school kids. I used to think I would do something like that, because it's one thing hearing it from someone who's just, here's data and stats, and it's another thing hearing it from someone who's been there and who can really understand. And so there was a period of time that I thought, well, maybe this is the reason why I went through this, is so that I can help other people with it. And while that's not what I do now, while that's not where my career path led me, it is something that I do talk about with a lot of my friends. Like one of my best friends, she's like, I'm so glad I talked to you about this, because I would have never known that this is how someone can feel. And now I feel more prepared to talk to my kids about this if they ever come to me.
Yeah. I think that's a very empathetic lens. And I would argue that you're applying that same muscle with the work you're doing now, right?
Yes.
Meaning like you experienced some financial trouble or whatever you want to call it. And then you sort of took that lived experience and now are teaching others to sort of avoid the same traps or whatever,
You're right. Yeah, no, and that's totally true, because I don't think that if I had ever gone through our financial situation, if I had never dealt with that, there's no way I would have the passion or the desire or the empathy to be able to work with women and get on their level and say, look, I know it's hard. I know it's tough. I know what you're going through, but there is hope. Because I think that there's financial educators out there that don't do that. And they do use shame and they do use guilt to instill fear in you to change. And that's not what I'm about.
I'm happy to hear that. So were you, before we get into like what sort of like where it started for you, like, were you, I'd imagine you're younger than I am.
How old are you?
I'm 40. I just turned 40 like a week ago.
Okay. I'm 34.
Okay. So did you have any financial literacy or education as a kid or a high schooler or anything like that?
Not really. It definitely isn't something that was taught in school.
Yeah.
And if by the very small chance it was taught in school, I was not listening and I could care less. No, I really didn't. And I like to think, did my parents teach me about money, or was I not listening when maybe they were trying to teach me about money? But I think our parents lived in a very different world where knowing how to budget, knowing how to pay off debt, knowing how to invest was definitely a privilege, because you didn't have access to the internet. It was something that had to have been directly taught to you, or you had to, have to know to go to the library and read a book about it. So while I might not have been taught, about financial literacy or been exposed to financial literacy when I was like in high school, I know my parents, or my mom at least, sat me down. And when I was applying for student loans, I was like, they're going to give me all this money? And my mom was like, you have to pay it back. And we don't take the full amount. We're going to calculate what you need. But in my eyes, I thought I would never have to pay this money back. It's just, they're giving it to me to go to college. How wonderful. Even though I remember she told me, like, you're going to have to pay these loans back. And I was like, Mom, be quiet. You don't know what you're talking about. So she tried.
Yeah.
She tried. But, I graduated college, and those first student loans hit 6 months after graduation, and I was paying the minimum, no big deal. And then I married my husband, who also had a lot of debt. When you combine it, it can be very overwhelming.
Yeah, it certainly can. Where do you, like, so your parents, it seemed, had like sort of good heads on their shoulders in regards to finances?
Yeah, there were times, I don't know, because I was so unaware. And I also think that your perception is your reality. So there were times in my childhood that I perceived that money was tight and money was tough, and there were arguments about money. And so my perception was my reality. And my reality was money is difficult. Money leads to fights. We don't have a lot of money. Whereas as an adult, when I talk about it to my mom, she's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, well, this is what I thought. She said, but that's not true. I said, but that perception was my reality.
Yeah.
So this is my reality, which is another reason why as a parent, I try to make sure that, whatever my kids are overhearing about money or just really anything, their perception is their reality. And I, as a parent, don't know what their perception is. So how can I make sure that I'm digging deep with them so that I make sure that by the time they're an adult, they don't have this distorted view of their reality?
Yeah, I think curiosity, critical thinking comes into play here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. You said something very crucial here, which is, I think, and I feel it in me, Allison, which is, I think many of us, and it's why you're probably very successful at what you're doing and have lots of people to work with, is like when money is brought up, when it's sort of the focus, it's an anxious thing. It brings up in my body. I'm feeling it right now. I feel it to this day as a 40-year-old human. It brings up anxiety. It brings up uncertainty and discomfort. And tell me a little bit about like your experience working with people and sort of being face to face with that sort of type of anxiety and that type of sort of emotional response to when you bring up basic, let's talk about money now,
Well, I think it's totally normal to have anxiety about it. I think it's totally normal to be hesitant to want to talk about that. And part of that is because society has taught us that you do not talk about money. It is taboo. You do not ask someone what they make. We don't talk about money. A lot of times, people our age, we grew up where you don't have a conversation about money at the dinner table. What are you thinking? That's so rude and disrespectful.
Right.
That it came off as it is disrespectful to your parents if you want to talk about money. That was the generation. And so whenever we have anxiety about money, I think that it's because it comes from our childhood. Sometimes we have money trauma in our childhood. Maybe money was never allowed to be discussed. And that in and of itself has created this anxiety with money. But I think also money is, when you're doing well with money and you have a lot of it, there's not as much anxiety as when you are in debt and you realize that you are living paycheck to paycheck. And then you start thinking, I'm an adult. Maybe I have a college degree and I'm a functioning human. How is it that I cannot seem to manage this? And that's when the shame comes in. That's where the guilt comes in. Why did I make these decisions before? How is it that I ended up in this much credit card debt? And the embarrassment. So I work with a lot of women who are embarrassed and feel shame to the point that they think I'm a single woman and no one will ever want to marry me because of what I'm bringing into a marriage. And hiding facts about themselves about money because it just makes them feel like they are not worthy if they are not in control of their money. And then if you're so embarrassed and you have so much shame and you have so much guilt, how do you then have the courage to step out and ask for help?
Right.
Because then that's almost admitting that maybe I haven't done something that's what I was doing in the past isn't working. And that's a big step. I mean, I liken it to me asking for help from my mom whenever I was 13 years old and depressed. That's a big step to take.
Right.
So you're having to come to terms with things and then seek out some sort of guidance without the judgment of others and worrying, what if the person I go to is judging me for what I've done? So I think, oh my gosh, I think it's just, there's so many layers to it.
Yeah.
That people think, well, if I just do this, I'll be better with money. But what they don't realizing is that they're having to unpack so many habits and so much trauma from their life, from years and years and years of their life, that it's going to take time and patience and practice to transform maybe some harmful money habits into helpful money habits and to start thinking about money differently.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. That's very, very well said. I think what it makes me think about. So you mentioned the person who, maybe um, there's so much nuance here. So there's the person
Mhm.
who maybe was raised and didn't have money, right? Money was
Right.
scarce, right? And so it becomes this anxious thing. And then
Mhm.
maybe the person who was raised with lots of money, like that could become
Mhm.
problematic, right? And I think like
Absolutely.
what I'm getting at is our sort of relationship to money. Is it like, what does that look like, right? Because I could see it being uh very unhealthy in both
Mhm.
scenarios, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because the person who maybe was raised with a lot of money, if they're not meeting that standard, now they have this high standard to meet. Are they a failure if they don't meet that standard? And then someone who was not raised with a lot of money, you have the scarcity mindset of there is not enough money in the world for me. I will always be poor. Or if you end up making more money, you have guilt because you made more than your parents or
Mm,
you're doing better off than the rest of your family. So then you have this guilt about that. So I mean, like you said, it's so nuanced. Um, but I think the main thing is for people to figure out, what does money mean to me and how does it make me feel? Do I feel good about it or do I feel anxious? And if I do feel anxious, if I am overwhelmed, if it makes me want to just go crawl into a cave and not talk to anyone, why is that?
yeah,
What is the root of the problem? Because so many people are just trying to treat the symptoms and not the root of the problem.
right, right. And that's sort of psychology 101, really. I think about this, and this question may sort of speak to my own privilege, but I wonder sometimes if our culture, our relationship to money, no, our value, right? Like how do we
Mhm.
value money? Do we overvalue money, right? Like I do feel like, at this sense sometimes, that there's this overemphasis on money
Mhm.
as a value. And yes, at the end of the day, it's also a thing that we need. We have to use
Mhm.
it to survive, to pay for our mortgage, to pay for our food. We have to earn it, by getting jobs, all these things. So there's these practical things that we just need money. And then the utopian sort of person in me is like, God, money's the worst. Like, why do we value it so much? It causes so much pain and suffering.
Mhm.
Like I'm torn.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. Whenever my husband and I really started digging deep on our financial journey, I wouldn't say I was obsessed with money.
Mm,
What I was obsessed with knowledge and
hmm
learning about personal finances because I had gone so long with choosing not to learn about it and choosing to ignore it and assume that everything would be okay. So I
hmm
had the privilege of that. And I know there were people in my life, friends or family members, who thought Allison worships money. And I remember feeling very uneasy with that. And I didn't know at the time how to come back and say, like, no, it's not that I'm worshiping money. It's not that it's that I had no combat. I had nothing else to say to them. But what
Yeah.
I realize now is it's not that I was worshiping money. It's that I was craving security.
Mm,
So while money can't technically buy happiness, to me, money was buying my peace of mind and my security. And not in the sense of I wanted to make $1 million or have all of this plethora of money so that way I could live this grand life. It was, how can I make sure I have enough money that I feel secure and my anxiety doesn't kick in whenever we need to replace the tires on our car and I don't want to go deeper into debt for that? How do
right.
I make sure I have enough money to feel secure for when my 3-year-old son goes into the hospital and we have to pay over $10,000 in medical bills? So for me, it came down to peace of mind because the lack of money at that time in my life was keeping me up at night and I couldn't sleep. We got to the point where we could not afford daycare payments for our son. So having money, learning about money and personal finances and the way I interacted with money meant that I had the security that I could pay daycare bills so that way I could go to work.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like when you live in that paycheck to paycheck life and it's not that you're worshiping money. At least it wasn't for me. It was almost the thirst for knowledge so that I could turn around my situation and finally be in a place where I felt a little more secure.
Yeah, I love that. And to be clear, I wasn't putting that on you.
Yeah. No, I know. No, I know you weren't. You were not. But I actually, like, that's something that I felt.
Yeah.
And I never knew how to explain it. And I actually just had a conversation with my friend and we just talked about this because I think that it can be very easy to fall into the trap of thinking, Am I a bad person because I think about money?
Sure.
Am I a bad person because I want to make more money? Does that make me a bad person? I think that is something that crosses many people's minds. And so I want to say that I fell into that trap and I could feel people, the way they were commenting, making comments to me. I knew that was their perception of me.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't think that was your perception of me.
No, I so appreciate that framework, the security piece, because ultimately you're like, look, I know what this feels like. I don't like this feeling. I'm an anxious mess. I wanna provide for my kids and my family, and I wanna have a safe, loving, as free of anxiety family as possible. And I think that's a admirable thing.
Yes. And I think that in those moments, really, there were choices I could have made. I could have just stayed there and said, this is just the way it's going to be. I don't make a lot of money. My husband doesn't make a lot of money. This is the life we chose. That could have been the spot I stuck in. But I was like, no, that sounds miserable. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to try to learn ways for me to get out of this position that I've put myself in so that I no longer feel anxious, so that I no longer have shame, so that I no longer feel guilt, so that I can feel differently whenever I am paying the bills, when I am dealing with money that seeps into your life every single day, whether we like it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
do you remember the moment when you sort of made the decision to I'm going to get my act together. Yes. I'm going to figure this out?
Yes. Well, there were two moments. One moment, I guess, didn't stick as well. There was a moment in college whenever I checked my bank account. And that morning, I was like, okay, great. I have $450. We're good. I'm going to go grocery shopping later. And I went to the grocery store and my debit card was declined 3 times. I did the walk of shame. I went home. I went back to my apartment at the time and I checked my bank account and my rent check had cleared. I didn't know that my rent check had not cleared yet. And so I had to call my mom and I said, I have no more money left. It was March and I had until my student loan money was supposed to last me through the end of May. And she said, I will help you only under the condition that you come home this weekend and we sit down and get a handle on this. And so I did. I went home. I sat in my childhood room with my mom and my bank statements. And I remember crying, thinking, what am I doing? Why am I spending so much money? And what I realized is I was spending money because anytime I had an emotion that was strong, whether it was because I was happy or I was sad or I was mad or I was glad or I did something that I felt like deserved celebrating or my boyfriend broke up with me, I would spend money as a result. Mm-hmm. I would spend money to escape my feelings and I would spend money to celebrate my feelings. And so at that moment, we put a system in place for me to track my spending. So that way I always knew how much money I had. And while that was wonderful, that was just the beginning. That didn't change my habits. What I did then was I just always knew how much money I had left until zero. Mm-hmm. So I still gave in to those feelings. I still used money as a coping mechanism, as a celebration. And I was still spending it like crazy. And it wasn't until my husband and I sat down in our apartment, We had just found out we were pregnant. We totaled up our debt. It was $111,000 worth of debt. We had no idea, no clue it was that much. And we looked at our spending and we realized we did not have enough money to actually pay for our unborn child's daycare. And it was in that moment of sitting at a kitchen table, tears streaming down my face, feeling like a failure, feeling like I married someone who didn't know what they were doing, wanting to blame him, where I said, this is it. We can't do this anymore. I cannot live like this anymore. And that was the moment of true change.
So walk me through like next day. Like, what do you do?
So we read a book. We read a book to just beginner level. How do you even write a budget? Because by this time we were still tracking our expenses. What my mom had taught me, we were still doing, but it was, how do we actually write a budget? What does that look like? And how do we pay off debt? Because we figured out that the way for us to actually make progress and be able to afford daycare was we had to get rid of some of the loans so that we could free up cash flow every month. Mm-hmm. So the next day it looked like, okay, how much are we going to spend on groceries this month? How much are we going to spend on restaurants? And that was rough. And it went terribly. We did a terrible job. We based our numbers off of another family's life and not our own. And within 5 days, that budget was trash. I mean, it didn't fit our life. So then it looked like coming back to the drawing board and saying, well, that didn't work. Okay, let's try again. And the whole goal was to pay off debt so that we could afford those monthly daycare payments.
Did either of you have to make, I mean, other than these like foundational sort of educational pieces, like did you have to make big career changes? Did your husband have to get a new job, things like that?
No, we were both two teachers. So we made probably at the time, maybe $80,000 combined, two teachers in a small town in Texas. And we knew we weren't going to make any career changes, but there was I think that summer, my husband did teach summer school. So there were a couple of things that we did to make a little bit of extra money. He's a band director, and they were requiring him to drive the bus, and he made $50 every trip. So that $50 would go to tackling some of that debt. So really it was about our habits. And if I'm being 100% honest, it was about my habits, not my husband's habit. Oh, yeah. Yes. I love spending money. Even to this day, I get almost this high from it. I look forward to it. And he is a saver. He does not like spending money. So it came down to finding ways for me to, over time, not all at once, because we tried that and it didn't work, over time, kind of change my habits so that I wasn't so tempted to spend money all the time.
What kinds of things were you tempted to spend money on?
Oh, just anything. I mean, anything. I loved spending money. I mean, for years, I used spending money as a coping mechanism. I had trained my brain that when I went through a hard time in life, to go walk the aisles of Ulta or Target or anything. I would get a coffee. I would walk. It was very therapeutic for me. I would go get a pedicure because it was how do I escape this uncomfortable feeling? And my escape, while some people turn to alcohol and some people turn to drugs and some people turn to sex, I escaped by spending money.
Yeah.
And so how can I deal with that so that way it's no longer an escape, which meant I had to deal with my feelings, which was not always fun.
Yeah, but they're there, and you're a human who has feelings, and if we ignore, they surface in ways that lead to suffering, as you know.
Exactly. So for me, it looked like it was like I was a child. I gave myself an allowance, and I still have an allowance every single month. And while it felt very childish and almost demeaning at the time, now I see it as freedom. because what this means is I can use my monthly allowance on whatever I want. And so I save it for things that I really want, or I splurge by getting my kids cake pops at Starbucks. And having that monthly allowance provides me an ability to still spend money, but within a boundary that supports our financial goals.
Yeah. So funny anecdote. When I met my wife, Jessica,
Mm-hmm.
I had some money. I had been working, a number of different jobs, and I needed a new car.
Mm-hmm.
And we were maybe 4 months into dating. And we go to this used car lot, and here's me, just clueless, never learned about money, because the person I was going to learn about money from was my father, and my father was not a nice person. So of course I was going to shut any chance of that down.
Yeah.
And so I get to this used car lot with Jessica, and she's like, aware of my ignorance, and so we show up, and she's trying to sort of like talk me through things and give me some pointers and things, and she was going to let me lead. Bad idea. Because I say to the guy, because I had been working, and I really didn't spend money at all. Like I was, when I met Jessica, she's like, throw out all of your underwear. These are disgusting. You've been wearing these underwear for years. It was that kind of situation. I never spent money. And so I had about $10,000 in my bank account. And I tell the guy,
oh no.
I show up and I say, I have $10,000. I say that out loud, and Jessica just like deep shame, just like buries her head in her hands. And she's like, "What are you doing? No, no!"
My gosh.
So just a simple sort of a story of like my own sort of ignorance. I've come a long way, and I've had to, because I have a little side business and all these things. But still, Jessica's the one that manages the finances in the house.
And, that's totally okay. I think that there's definitely room for balance, especially in a relationship. I have a lot of women that say, well, my spouse isn't on board. And I'm like, you don't need a husband to budget. Like, you don't need your spouse on board to write a budget, because there are areas of the spending that you're in charge of. So budget for those. But, in our family, I'm the numbers person. I'm the one who I look forward to writing the budget. I'll write it 2 weeks in advance to try to predict the budget. I mean, it's so dorky, but I love it. And my husband doesn't, he hands it off to me, and he sits with me for big picture budget decisions.
There you go.
Which totally works. And we found what works for us. Now, in the beginning, it did not work like that. We both sat down together every single month, multiple times a month, to talk about money and honestly deal with money fights, money arguments, money disagreements. And I feel like a lot of married couples, or couples in general, sometimes they get to the point where they have disagreements and they do have money arguments. And sometimes it's just easier to say, you know what, we're not going to do this. We're not going to budget. We're not going to worry about this. We're just going to scrape by, because doing that is easier than facing those tough conversations and making those decisions together. But the good news that I can offer to anyone who's sitting here thinking, yes, this is me and my partner, is that the more you practice those conversations and the more you have them, the easier they become. And so the types of conversations my husband and I have now would not have been as easy to have 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. It's vulnerable to sort of lay out your cards in any context, right? Whether we're talking about money or, feelings or getting on the same page about, wanting or not wanting to go to a party or whatever, right? Like it takes vulnerability. And I think what has helped me, Allison, which is reminding myself, because I'm a sensitive, feely guy. Like I'm just like deeply sensitive. Like if I I'm like always thinking that Jessica's like out to get me, not really, but like I've had to remind myself, like very actively, I tell myself, we're on the same team. Like she is a safe person. We can have hard conversations because that's what a partnership is.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah. And what I've had to remind myself, whether it comes to the thoughts that come into my mind about money or just anything, is that sometimes my thoughts lie to me. And so I've come to learn, and this was from years of therapy, that I used to believe everything that entered my mind was true. So like you said, I sometimes, I'm very sensitive, very feely, and my husband's not. He calls himself a robot, but he's just not, he's just, things don't faze him. He doesn't have high highs and he doesn't have low lows. Okay, he doesn't get super excited. He's just very, he's not a roller coaster. Freddy. He's 100%. And there are times I'm like, are you mad at me? He's like, no. So I have to remember that thought that I'm having about him is just a thought. It is not true. It is not fact. So whenever I had those thoughts about being in debt, I must be dumb because we're in $111,000 worth of debt. I'm stupid. Oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Those were all thoughts. Those weren't facts. So it's not that I was dumb. I'm an intelligent woman. It's that I did make past choices that I no longer serve me. And so how can I move forward and start making choices with my personal finances that serve me and help me reach my goals? And so I think that it can be so easy to get hung up in the emotions because money is emotional. It is so emotional. And I think that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But I also think that sometimes we have to try our best to remove the emotions so that we can make sound decisions.
Yeah. And I think that we're not going to be able to discern if these feelings are facts or these thoughts are facts or not if we're not surfacing them, right? If we're not sort of voicing them with a safe partner, and just opening up and discussing the stuff.
Yes. And there are times with my husband who is, very steady, where I will say, hey, I need some help with my thoughts. And I will say a thought to him and I'm say, is this true? Like, is it like, am I crazy? Is this a true thought? And he'll just be like, no, that's not fact. Here's the facts of the situation. And what's wonderful is, I run my own business. I do this alone. I have one part-time, contract VA. And so a lot of times I'm facing these feelings on my own running this business. And he's a really great sounding board because he'll be like, no, that's not reality. Here is a better picture of reality. And sometimes it's nice to have that person that can help kind of bring you back down. So that way you don't just spin and spin and spin in these thoughts that aren't reality.
As I say very often on this show, Allison, we are mirrors for each other. Right?
Yeah.
And we need each other in that way.
Yes.
So absolutely.
Yeah.
So you start educating yourself about budgeting and finance and stuff. When does it start to sort of like really take hold and you're like starting to cut down on that $111,000 worth of debt?
I mean, it started taking hold right away because we were so determined. But at what point were we comfortable with it and feeling like we knew what we were doing? That's a different story.
Yeah. So
that took us about, I would say, anywhere from 3 to 6 months. There were lots of mistakes along the way, lots of curveballs thrown our way, things that we just needed to learn about ourselves and our spending. But it took probably about 3 to 6 months for us to really get in a good rhythm, have a good routine with budgeting and with paying off debt. And even though we weren't making a lot of money, we had a child in daycare, then we had another child. So we had 2 children in daycare. So it took us almost 5 years to pay off every single penny. But during that process, I used to think when we first started, I thought, I will budget until we pay off this debt and then I am done. And I'm never writing another budget ever again. I don't care about them. They can suck it. I'm just done with budgeting. And what I realized, what I came to learn is that the more I did it and the longer I did it, it no longer became something I did, but it became a part of who I was. And so I no longer wrote budgets. I was a budgeter. When it became part of who I was is when I felt like I was in this rhythm and I no longer doubted myself and my abilities when it came to my personal finances. And I saw a bigger picture for my life and for my future than I had ever considered before. Because before I was stuck in this thought process and this mindset that we will forever just barely scrape by because we are two teachers. And it took time for me to learn we are meant for bigger and better things than barely scraping by, even if we're two teachers. And
Sure.
so that's really how my thought process on that changed over the years.
Mm. And were you a teacher during those 5 years or?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was a teacher for 5 years, and after we paid off debt, I couldn't stop talking about budgeting. I couldn't stop talking about it. And my cousin-in-law one day said at a family gathering, "Shut up. We're done hearing about this. We're done hearing about you talk about this. You always talk about it. It's clearly something you're passionate about. Take it to the masses. We are not the people you need to be helping and serving. You need to find there are other people out there that you can help and serve." And 2 weeks later, I started Inspire Budget.
Wow. And how long did it take to get a client?
Oh gosh. Well, I mean, I made online printables and everything, and I have basically a membership right now where I walk women. I walk women through a path to take back control of their finances, and it took me. My goal was to quit my teaching job within 5 years of starting. It was kind of like this aha thing. I always wondered what do I want to be when I grow up, even as a teacher. I felt like there was something different. And so once I started Inspire Budget, I knew this was it. And my goal was 5 years. And then within 2 years, I was able to replace my teaching salary. So I was able to leave teaching 2 years after that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's been wonder. I've loved it. It's been harder in some ways than teaching and easier in some ways. It's definitely offered me a lot more flexibility, which is what I love.
So nowadays, as sort of a business owner, you're steering your own ship. You're captain of your own ship. What are the kinds of I don't know, big budget or splurge things that you enjoy partaking in?
Oh gosh. Well, in terms of my business or in terms of just my life?
Either. Yeah.
In terms of my life, travel. I love travel. It's very interesting. What anyone who's listening right now, I want you to give yourself permission to change your desires over time. Because what I used to love spending money on was stuff. I loved it. I loved stuff. I loved makeup. I loved home decor items. And that was the thing I loved spending money on. And over time, I've transitioned that to travel, being able to take my kids places, being able to travel with my husband and really focusing on seeing not just, the world. I don't want to say seeing the world, but seeing our state, enjoying our state, enjoying the areas around us and creating those memories. Getting my kids, we're really big on getting out in nature. We go camping a lot. I feel like camping with your children, I cannot tell you the difference I saw in my youngest son whenever we started camping and going hiking and the changes it made in him. And he stepped up as a leader whenever we were hiking on trails that he was the leader on. It's had such amazing impacts on our family. And so that's definitely what I value splurging on, are those types of trips and travel and new experiences for my kids to step up as leaders as a child. Because I think so often, parents are the leaders and you do what we say because we said it and that's it. But I think that we have to provide opportunities for our children to be leaders as well and to pave their own way. And I think hiking and camping and being out in nature is a beautiful and wonderful place to explore that with your child.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a big backpacker camper myself. And I also believe that there's so much kids have to teach us.
Oh, yes. Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I totally agree. So that's one thing that I love. I love spending money. I love spending money on those types of things.
So let me ask you this, Allison. Do you see, or what are your thoughts around just the kind of is there I guess let me back up. Is there a disparity in financial literacy among different cultures, races, etc.?
Mhm. Oh, yes. I definitely think there is. And when you look at just even inside the United States, I mean, for years, financial education came from white men. That was who you learned from, was white men. And think about how many people are looking at these white men and saying, why is there no one like me out there?
Sure.
So as someone who is, involved in the financial literacy education space, I'm happy to say that there are so many people of all different races and genders coming out and leading in this space and teaching, which is to me so wonderful, that people can see others teaching in this space, succeeding in this space, building wealth that look like them. And they're able to say, that person looks just like me. I can do this. And even children. It's so important for children, for, children of color to see others in that space being successful. And so while on the whole, we're still led by in this financial space, there is still a stronghold from, white males in this space. I do see it. Maybe that's just because I have purposefully chosen to surround myself with the diversity inside the financial education space. I have to remember that my reality that I'm surrounding myself with is not everyone's reality. I have to remind myself that because I forget. But I am seeing more diversity coming in place.
That's good. Yeah, I mean, representation is crucial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, another piece of this that maybe it's connected in my mind is, so I kind of rail against, maybe you don't know this about me. I kind of rail against sort of the system of capitalism on this show from time to time. I liken myself to a bit of a socialist, and I know that, and maybe this sort of plays a role in that sort of diversity piece in our history, which is the relationship between capitalism and racism, right? It is sort of inherently a racist system.
Yes, 100%.
Right. So
100%.
Yeah. What are your thoughts about that? Have you sort of discussed that with clients, things like that?
I haven't discussed it with clients. No, I haven't. But I think I have a lot of learning to do. I think we all have a lot of learning to do because what we have been taught is not the truth. So going back to, what we've been taught in school about our society is a version of the truth. And I think that there's definitely, these systematic, these systems that are in place are inherently going to make it harder for certain people to be successful financially. And it comes down to, so many things, to laws that were put in place. And while I love to think that we'll be able to overcome, the gender pay gap, and while I love to think that we'll get to a point where all will be equal in my lifetime, I also try to be a realist and say, I don't know if that's possible, but maybe that's possible in my children's lifetime or my children's lifetime. But I do think that what it comes down to is knowledge. Being willing to learn and open our eyes to something different than what we have been exposed to. And that is something that I am saying yes to opening my eyes to considering different possibilities and different truths that maybe I didn't know about 10 years ago. And when I think when you're willing to have that open mindset and be willing to listen, that we can make change. However, I also know, and I have family members and friends that are not comfortable enough to being able to open themselves up to that, because then it means they might have been wrong. And I'm okay with being wrong. So that's where I think it really comes into play.
Yeah. Human hubris. It's a dangerous thing. And I'm with you, Allison. I think, there's so much at play here. And when we're talking about sort of financial literacy and capitalism and these things, if anything like the work that you're doing is truly about, it's about knowledge. It's about awareness. It's about awareness of money and sort of the mirror back. It's about awareness of self, really.
Yes, absolutely.
And with that awareness of self has to come a willingness to be open, a willingness to shed and unlearn and be uncomfortable and allow for other ideas to shape and to transform. And like that is the space of growth and healing and community, not the sort of the persistent sort of boot of capitalism that we were promised, right?
Yeah. Yes, I completely agree. It comes down to being willing to unlearn and to own that you were wrong, or that things need to be different, or things need to change. And to also, like, I've had people say, like, they've, come at me and said, well, what am I supposed to do? And my response is care. If you start with caring, whether you're caring, you care about, systematic racism, whether you care about, the wage gap, whether you care about your own personal finances, once you care, then you can figure out the next step. And the next step will be easier to recognize. But if you don't care, then none of the steps, they'll all be invisible to you.
And I agree. And care in context of one another, right?
Absolutely.
Care in context of the fact that we live in a tapestry. We don't live on an island by ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up this past year plus living in a pandemic and sort of the toll that is assuredly taken on our finances and our budgets. And so talk me through a little bit about like your experience this past year with you and your clients.
I think that it really brought a lot of people down. I think that I had a lot of clients that just said, why bother? Why bother in this moment of time? It's very easy to say that, because saying why bother and just saying, I'm not going to worry about this right now is a lot easier than doing the work to figure out how to budget. But a lot of people were just left in a really, really tough situation and are continuing to be left in really tough situations right now as things continue to change and progress. And I think that it can make you feel like you've gone backwards. I made all this progress and now I feel like I'm backwards because my spouse lost their job and we had to go into debt, or we used all of our savings. And so why bother? And that's something that until you deal with that feeling, we can't move forward with your personal finances. We can't take the next step until you realize that it is worth bothering for. But just dealing with it, I know so many people struggled and even were left with funeral costs. And that's very, very tough. And I wish I could help every single one of the people I work with. I do wish I could just monetarily help them by giving them money, but then of course, then you go into codependency there. So that also probably wouldn't be the best thing. But I think that it was just really tough. And I think that it's going to take time to realize that even though you might feel like you went backwards, you moved backwards, or things got worse for you this past year, that there is still a future for you where you make progress with your money. You can start today and make progress, and that hard work and effort and time and attention that you put into learning about your own finances and developing habits that will help you will pay off.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And it's ultimately, to me, it speaks of, hey, we have today, maybe we screwed up today. Great.
Mm-hmm.
We have tomorrow as well, right?
Absolutely.
And it's not that's the other maybe sort of lie of capitalism, which is like ever forward, right? Like always progressing, like that's not real either, right? Like the human condition is ebbs and flows, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Sometimes we struggle, sometimes we thrive, and being open to it all is what humanity's about.
Mm-hmm. And exactly. And when you said that, it reminds me, I talk a lot about seasons. We go through seasons of our life, and you might be in a season of sacrifice right now. That might be the season that you're in, but that doesn't mean you'll be in that season forever. You can move there. There will be a season of abundance for you. And so, I do think of life as, and your finances as you go through these different seasons, and that's okay. It's not meant to be this straight line forward. That's not natural. That's not normal. So allow you to accept that it's okay to go through these different seasons with your money.
Yeah. Healing is not linear, nor is budgeting.
No, nor is your personal finances sometimes.
Yeah, nor is your personal finances. Yeah, I love that. Allison, let's talk about empathy heroes. We always sort of wrap up the show talking about people in our lives who are empathetic, compassionate, caring, feely people. I'll go first to give you a moment to reflect on your own empathy hero.
Okay.
My empathy hero this week is the writer Angela Davis. She's a writer. She's also a abolitionist. She's a speaker. She's a thinker. She's amazing. And there's a quote she said that I love, which is, quote, "You have to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world, and you have to do it all the time." I love that. I think what she's speaking to here is just foundational, transformational change in our world and our culture. It's kind of speaking to some of the stuff we were talking about in regards to capitalism and race. And I believe that. I think as just as I said that we ebb and flow and things are not linear, that doesn't mean that we can't sort of mindfully be open,
right?
Be willing to transform, be willing to learn, be willing to be radical and passionate in our ideas, right? And not sort of sit silently by and idly by, right? Because of very real human things such as fear and anxiety and shame and guilt and all these things we get wrapped up in, which are so human. But yeah, Angela Davis is a hero of mine, a great thinker. And if you feely humans out there have not heard of Angela Davis, I encourage you to go check her out. She's amazing.
I'm sitting here trying to debate between my you called it an empathy hero.
Yep.
So I feel like this is so cliche, but mine is my mom. And what's interesting is she's not very feely, but she's always very supportive and not judgmental. So you can go to her with your deepest, darkest secret, and she won't sit in judgment. And so she has taught me to try to do the same for others, even though my human nature wants to judge. She has taught me to not do that and to not judge. Even when I just incredibly disagree, she has taught me to look at it differently and to realize that when I'm judging others, really what it is it's a reflection of myself. And that I can do the work on myself to no longer be irritated by this person that I'm judging, or be frustrated by this, or be find myself in this difficult situation. So that she's definitely my hero in that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. And she always told me this quote, and I don't know if she got this quote from somewhere, but she would always tell me this, even when I was in high school and just going through, high school's tough. Middle school, high school, just lots of emotions. Anytime something happened to me, she would have me say, Allison, just say, I accept it as if I had chosen it. To try to get through some of these things that I maybe didn't understand. Just accept it as if you had chosen it. And while that I see now, while that could have issues in some ways, for me, it allowed me to learn to not dwell. To not dwell in sadness, to not dwell in a deep, dark place, to not sit in this pain, but to feel the pain and then say, you know what? I'm going to choose now to be happy, even when that's hard.
I love that. And what I think about when I hear that quote and sort of the way that your mom is there's a lot of wisdom in just recognizing what we can and can't control, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we can only control how we sort of reflect on it and how we react, right?
Yes. And that's what she's taught me is when I get, there are times I'll call her up and I'll be really upset about a certain situation. And she's like, you can't control that person, or you can't control that thing. The only thing you can control is your reaction. So you have to figure out what to do. And she talks a lot. She loves Byron Katie. I don't know if you know who Byron Katie is.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And so she'll say, you need to do the work and figure out, how do you find peace with this? Because ultimately you have no control over that situation, but you do have control over yourself and the way you perceive that situation.
Preach it, Mom. I love it.
she's the best.
She sounds like it.
I got very lucky, very, very lucky.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
Yes.
Well, Allison, tell the listeners out there, all the Feely humans, where they can connect with you, learn more about the work you're doing, all that stuff.
Well, if you're listening to this podcast, I also have a podcast. It's called the Inspire Budget Podcast. You can also follow me on Instagram at Inspire Budget, or go to inspirebudget.com.
Amazing. Well, listeners, all of those will be in the show notes for this episode at feelyhuman.co. Allison, thank you so much for being on the show. I very much appreciate a new voice, a new sort of territory covered on this Feely podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Known.
You're very welcome. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here, we're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring, pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.